Until I got these two together, I never actually realised quite how similar they are. I thought they were just two single VCO semi-modulars with plenty of patch points and a single LFO. But it turns out there's only 4 real major differences. First is that the oscillator is based on the 3340 on the CRAVE, which is from the Prophet 5, which Behringer now manufacture, the clones of the chip I think, and Moog's is a Moog VCO. Secondly, there's a sustain level knob on the CRAVE, which the Moog doesn't have. And the envelope on the CRAVE is digital, I think, so you don't get so much control, especially if you're using fast envelope times, and I'll demo all this later. And the final major difference is that the Moog has got a full-sized half-inch jack out, which the CRAVE doesn't have, but the CRAVE does have this headphone out in the top corner here, although it hasn't got a separate headphone volume control. As far as MIDI is concerned, they've both got a standard 5-pin DIN in, and the CRAVE also has got a MIDI through, and it has USB MIDI. The Moog doesn't have USB, just a single MIDI input. Other than that, yeah, pretty identical. So let's look at how they compare. Looking at the sort of form factors, the Moog is compatible with Eurorack and the CRAVE isn't, but it does have a larger surface area, you can see clearly there. And it's laid out a bit more logically in my opinion. Each of the sections is clearly labelled: oscillator, filter, modulation, utility, envelope, sequencer. It's a little bit more haphazard, it feels, on the Moog. Although, you know, once you start using anything, you get used to where anything is. But when you've got the two of them next to you, this does feel, the Behringer does feel more logically laid out. But it's got more space, hasn't it? Because it's not trying to squeeze into Eurorack. It's not completely illogical in any way on the Moog. It just doesn't feel as easy to follow when you first pick it up as the Behringer does. And both the knobs and the switches actually feel really nice and solid. If anyone's played any of the new Behringer gear, it's really well put together. As is the Moog, you know, as you'd expect. The switches are a little chunkier, a little heavier on the Behringer, but there's nothing in it really. But by far the biggest difference is the buttons on the sequencers. On the CRAVE, they're really clicky. Let's just turn the volume down. So, I don't know if the mic's picking this up, but it's really clicky. And they're not very nice to use, to be honest. If you haven't got your monitors turned up, sometimes the click feels louder than the actual sound coming out. You know, it's £130, so let's not get overly critical. But it's not a nice experience playing with those buttons. On the Moog, the sort of nice, squishy, rubberized pads, just really nice to use, a really nice interface. The wood on the Moog looks nicer. You can see the wood grain on it, if that's important to you. I often thought the wood on the Behringers was plastic because it's sort of so well lacquered, I suppose I should say. You can't really see the grain on it. But if I'm talking about the wood grain and the quality of the finish of the lacquers, you know, we're looking into sort of the detail here. When one is £130 in the UK and the other's around £500, you'd expect the Moog to, on some levels, look and feel a little bit more expensive, wouldn't you? But really, except for the buttons, there's nothing in it. Moving on to the various functions, they've both got the identical set of 14 CV outs and 18 ins. This again feels a bit more logical with the outs on the right hand side and the ins on the left. It's a bit more difficult to see on the Moog, which are the ins and the outs, but the ins have got just white text on a black background, and the outs are reverse of that, so they've got the sort of the white background with the black text. But I think maybe the Moogs are arranged in more alignment with the actual functions of the CVs, so maybe after time, when you're doing a lot of patching, maybe this might seem a bit more logical. But from the outset, the Behringer's interface just feels easier to follow. So, as I say, they've both got a single VCO with a choice of either a saw or a pulse, and a filter with a choice of high pass or low pass. And as I mentioned earlier, the envelopes are slightly different. They've both got attack and decay, which doubles as a release. There's decay, attack, decay, and we have a sustain knob on the Behringer, which we don't have on the Moog. They've both got a single LFO with a choice of square or triangle. They've got a glide control, and they've also got this VC mix here. Where is it on the Moog? Here it is up here. So you can take any of your CV outs, stick it into the VC mix in, and then you can adjust the level that's then coming out of this circuit here. So you can fine control any of the ins and outs, which is a really useful little circuit. The sequencers are essentially identical with a few minor exceptions, but if you've learned to use one, you can use the other. If you've seen my video on how to use the Behringer sequencer, then you can also use the Moog sequencer. They're that similar, down to which LED flashes to indicate which function set or which parameters are working on each of the sort of separate steps. So, now we've established their similarities, let's take a look at how they actually perform. So, onto the oscillators. As I said, the oscillators will sound different. This is based on the 3340, which is the Prophet 5, which Behringer are now cloning, and the Moog's obviously a Moog VCO. So not expect them to sound identical, but function-wise they are. They've both got a choice of either a sawtooth or a square, and you've got a frequency knob, you've got a pulse width knob, you've got an oscillator modulation amount, and you've got a mix between a VCO and noise or external. You've got the choice of envelope or LFO as the modulation source, and pulse width or frequency as the modulation destination, and that's exactly the same on the Moog. So let's take a listen to them, shall we? As I say, not expect them to sound the same. And even though that's just a sawtooth, I can hear a difference there. I think the Moog sounds a bit smoother, and the Behringer sounds a bit more aggressive. Neither's better than the other. It's just a matter of taste. Okay, onto the square. Bit difficult to get them bang on an exact square, as you saw there. But reducing those intermediate frequencies sort of between the main peaks to as low as I can. Let's try that over here. Again, I think the Moog sounds a bit smoother. Again, I think the Moog sounds a little bit smoother. A bit more buzzy, that one, isn't it, the Behringer? Let's have a play with the pulse width then. So the Moog doesn't go through 0. And neither does the Behringer. The Moog's a little bit thinner at the extremes. But let's modulate the pulse width with the LFO. So I'm not getting it to go through 0 there, but I'm sure I've had it doing that in the past. Let's try that on the Moog. It's acting really similarly, isn't it? At those extremes there. Let's put that over here. Again. Okay, let's get this to go through 0. And interestingly, if you note, this is on full and this is on just under half. You get much, much hotter output from the Behringer than you do from the Moog. But maybe if I took the direct VCA out from the Moog, maybe you get the same effect. The phones on the Behringer, just show you this, a lot quieter. Yeah, but I do think they sound slightly different. I think the Behringer sounds a little bit more aggressive than the Moog, but there's not too much in it, is there? Let's have a listen to the modulation when we flick it over to frequency then. You get about half a semitone more modulation from the Behringer. I measured it at 30.5 semitones on the Moog and 31 semitones on the Behringer. And it's bipolar as well, you notice there. We're not going from a C up to an F or a B or whatever it is up there. We're going up and down. Which has its uses, but I quite like it being unipolar, and then you can sort of use that as a sequencer almost. But again, they're both exactly the same, just matching the LFO rate and the modulation amount.
It's exactly the same as the Moog. It's exactly the same as the Moog.
And you've got a noise or external input as well. Don't know why I'm changing keys. It doesn't change the sound of the noise. Okay, moving on to the filter. Lovely smooth Moog filter, and this has got the ladder filter in it as well. I'm assuming it's the one they've used on the Model D. Let's put the resonance on about 50%. Let's try that on the Behringer. So just tuning them into each other a little bit better. Getting the same sort of growls at the same frequencies. There we go. Couldn't tell one from the other really. Oh, lovely. Let's come back up again. Just try and do the same on the Behringer. So watch your ears again. Oh, that's bassy, that, isn't it? Is that where it stopped? No. That's identical, isn't it?
It's exactly the same as the Moog. It's exactly the same as the Moog.
Let's try the high pass then. It's a bit weird, isn't it? It's almost like a notch. Again, very, very similar, if not identical. Let's add the resonance. Resonance is really interesting on this. It sort of negates the actual filter itself, a bit like a notch does. Just see if we can do that straight off with the Behringer. Not bad for a first attempt. So let's sweep that up again. And watch your ears. So you'll notice when the resonance is full, the filter's not really doing anything. So let's put the cutoff all the way up. Bring the resonance in. It's a bit the opposite of the low pass, isn't it? Where when you add the resonance, the volume drops. When you add the resonance in this, the volume increases.
Exactly the same as the Moog. It's exactly the same as the Moog.
You can choose the envelope or LFO as mod source, and you can have positive or negative polarity, exactly the same on the Moog. So let's try and make a bog standard reso bass sort of sound, shall we? I have to say, when you're trying to dial in tones like that, the clicking of the keys really does annoy me. Because that's almost as loud as the sound itself. So I've no idea what's happened at the start of this sound because I can hear the click so much. So moving on to the envelopes, and this is where we do have some major differences. The main one being the fact that this has got a sustain knob on the Behringer, which means there are tones you can get on the Behringer you can't get on the Moog. So for example, turn the sustain on. So you hear that you've got a slight decay down to the sustain level, and that's nice in a mix because it helps you pick out transients. It helps a sound be punchy without muddying a mix. If you put that on something like a pulse width modulation sound, so you get that punch at the start without the sustain knob. With it. So this can only do this. Let's just show you that. On sustain on. We're going to go to a pulse width around there, modulation amount, pulse width, frequency about there. But we can't drop it. We could take the sustain off and use the decay. But it's not the same as doing this. And there could be a very good reason why the Behringer does it and the Moog doesn't. And I think that's because this has got an analog envelope generator and the Behringer's got a digital one. And I'll show you why I think it's digital. It might be in the specs somewhere, I've not read it. just while I've been playing around with it, it's come to my attention. So if I play something with just a really short attack, that's modulating the filter. Just a click like that, and let's play a really basic pattern. I'll zoom in so you can see this maybe a bit clearer. So I'm getting nothing between here and here, and then it just clicks in with an attack. So there you go, that's like sort of step one, isn't it? And there's step two. So I'll just show that again. So there's not a smooth transition to the duck sound, the whack, 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 whack from the click, is there? And let's just demonstrate that on the Moog as well. Just seems to be a few more little attacks that you can get from the Moog between there and there. So it's a definite change from a click into a quack on the Behringer, whereas there's a few more little sort of clicks and bits in there, isn't there, before we get to the quack. But the Behringer does have slightly longer attack and decay. If you look at this graph here, you can see that there's a couple of, well, there's about a second or so in it. If we just put them on full attack, full decay. Moving on to the LFOs then. The LFO and the Behringer states it's fully analog. The whole of the Mother32 is fully analog. But the very fact that it states that the LFO is fully analog leads me to believe even more that the envelope isn't. Otherwise, it probably would have stated in all the literature that there was a fully analog envelope as well. But they both go from 0.1 to 350 Hz according to the manuals. So let's just put it on full for a start, sawtooth, and let's modulate the oscillator frequency. Tear those on full again. Just take the decay off. In fact, the rate of the Moog's a little bit higher because these are about even. And then we can go a lot higher on the Moog. Well, say a lot, you know. Just want to twist the knob a little bit more, but neither of them are going into real true FM territory. They're all around the sort of 350 Hz mark. Let's try it on a square. I don't like the square on the bipolar. You get all those sort of those clicks 2 octaves lower. But let's in fact let's reduce the amount so it's not quite so bad. But essentially it's an analog LFO, isn't it? It does square and it does triangle. And it's used to modulate stuff. So nothing in that really.
It's exactly the same as the Moog. It's exactly the same as the Moog.
Okay, looking at the sequences, and as I said earlier, they're essentially identical. They've got a keyboard mode and a step mode. At the minute we're on keyboard mode, so we've got a green flashing light here and a non-flashing light on the Moog. And the red light here indicates the octave we're in, so. And to go into step mode, we shift and step. Shift and step. And what we see here is we've only actually got one step programmed into each of these, because it's the pattern I was using earlier to demonstrate the envelopes. But let's just edit step 1. So shift and step 1. We're in edit mode, it's flashing. Shift and edit mode. So we've got an orange light there now, not a green one. And the step is flashing to indicate we're editing this step. So let's add some glide. We've toggled it on or off using the glide knob. So let's do it over here, glide knob. There we go. And number 5's flashing. Number 5's lit here. Let's add an accent. Number 7's lit. Add an accent here. Number 7's lit. Let's put a rest on it. Number 8's lit. Rest. 8's lit. So you're getting the gist.
It's exactly the same as the Moog. It's exactly the same as the Moog.
Let's put a ratchet. So shift and glide. Shift and glide. A ratchet of 3. 6 is lit. Same over here. Shift and glide. Whoops. A ratchet of 3. And 6 is lit. I don't know how well you can see that on the video, but if you're getting the point, that the only difference being so far is that these are flashing on the Behringer, and on the Moog they're not flashing. I've programmed in a pattern into these now, which is just a C for 4 notes. So C, 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 then G, 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 G. Let's play it. And over here, you can hear the gate lengths changing there, and that's something I'm going to show you now. So let's go into edit step 1, gate length. Let's change it into the full length of the gate, or the full length of the step, I should say. So I've done that for step 2 as well. Let's do it for step 3. And step 4, so we should get 1 note followed by 4 notes. And that's what in the manual it calls a tie. I'll do the same on the Behringer. So now both manuals state that that's a tie. So, but if we modulate the filter with the envelope, for example, we get. So slightly odd behaviour, but they both do this, so it's not one better than the other. I just think it's a bit weird because you can't have, say, you wanted to play well, you don't hold the note. What you'd have to do is mute it. So go into shift and step and then mute those notes. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but it's just a little bit of an odd thing that they both do. Let's show it over here. So still triggering the envelope, even though it's the manual states it's a tie. So let's just mute those notes. So shift and mute. And if we mute them all, we can't hear anything, as you'd expect. However, on the Behringer, if you mute them all, you get these ghost notes. So everything's muted there. But it's still sending out some envelope triggers that are doing something. So I think that might be due a firmware update. It is a bit weird, that. On the Behringer, we can play them backwards, so shift and play, and we watch the LEDs, instead of going forwards, they go backwards. So press shift and play here. It doesn't work. I think it puts it in record mode actually, whereas this has got a separate button for record. So some very minor differences, but essentially very, very similar. The only big difference really is the Crave has those weird ghost triggers, so the envelopes are triggering even when the notes or the steps on mute. And it can go backwards. It's got a separate record button, which the Moog doesn't have. So after a little bit more experimentation, it turns out that the Behringer doesn't send the ghost trigger envelope gates out of its CV. So maybe there is something that can be done on a firmware update. And just to show that, I've got the Behringer controlling the Moog here. So you're listening to just the Moog at the minute. And now let's listen to the Behringer in solo. So let's have a play around with the settings on these just to double check. So no, it doesn't send them out. They've both got the assignable CV out. That sends CVs that are synced to the sequencer. So you can get long, slow ramps or triangles over the course of a pattern. And has a random mode, so it sends out a different CV for every step, which is essentially like a sample and hold LFO. Accessed via shift, reset, set end and 8. They're in the mode there. And on this, it's shift, reset and 8. And there we go, we're in the same mode again. And the output modes are even assigned the same number. So I've got this one set up for the random mode, which is output mode 7. So let's put assignable output into the cutoff. So when I play this, let's turn it up. You can hear we're getting a sort of sample and hold effect on the filter. Exactly the same on the Moog.
It's exactly the same as the Moog.
So in conclusion, absolutely staggered about how similar these two synths are. I really wasn't aware that they, I knew they were a similar sort of thing, but didn't realise they were essentially the same. One's £500, it's a Moog. One's £130. It's a Behringer. I think it's a bit odd that Behringer didn't put theirs into Eurorack format as well, but maybe it's the size of the sequencer and trying to squeeze everything on. I don't know. But the main difference is really just when you're using them, the Behringer's just not as nice to play. These keys, they are clicky and they sort of really annoyed me after a while. So just try to imagine I was back in the 70s with some weird clunky interface, and that seemed to do the trick. And the fact that it's this weird orange colour sort of really helped with that. Even the Crave logo looks like the old BBC Two logo from the 80s. So value for money wise, the Crave's great. It's really subjective if you like the Moog sound or you like the 3340 oscillators better. If you need the snappier envelope that you get on the Moog. But for me, as I say, shocked at how similar they were. So I hope that was of some use to somebody somewhere. See you next time.